Good morning and welcome back to Reading Wikis for You, where we read the wiki articles for you. And today I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the proposed United States acquisition of Greenland. Obviously, as part of our series on current events. Keep in mind, this article may change. There may be changes to the story by the time that you actually watch the video. So there is going to be a link in the description that will take you to the actual article, just in case there have been any updates. Also, keep in mind, these are not about editorializing. It's just trying to get some background information on current events. But, of course, feel free to put comments down below. Let me know your opinions, thoughts. And of course, I'd absolutely love to hear more about topics that you think would be interesting. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Since the 19th century, the United States has made several attempts to acquire the island of Greenland from Denmark. There were notable internal discussions within the U.S. federal government about acquiring Greenland in 1867, 1910, 1946, 1955, 2019, and 2025, and acquisition has been advocated by American Secretaries of State William H. Seward and James F. Burns, privately by Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, and publicly by President Donald Trump, among others. After World War II, the United States secretly offered to buy Greenland. There was a public discussion about purchasing the island during Trump's first term in 2019, and again after Trump's 2024 re-election, as part of his American expansionism policy. Since taking office in 2025, Trump has threatened to invade or annex Greenland, actions that would violate international law, despite consistent rejection from the Greenlandic government, which has repeatedly stated that Greenland's future is its own decision and responsibility. While Greenland is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, Greenlandic and Danish authorities have publicly asserted Greenland's right to self-determination and stated that Greenland is, quote, not for sale, unquote. 85% of Greenlanders oppose the idea of an American takeover, and many Danes see the historical ties with Greenland as an integral part of Danish national identity. The United States has long viewed Greenland as vital to national security. In the early 20th century, war plans listed Greenland alongside French Caribbean islands, Dutch Antilles, and parts of Canada to preemptively seize and fortify in the event of a threatened attack on the U.S. During World War II, the U.S. invoked its Monroe Doctrine and occupied Greenland to prevent use by Germany following the German occupation of Denmark. The U.S. military remained in Greenland after the war, and by 1948, Denmark abandoned attempts to persuade the U.S. to leave. The following year, both countries became members of the NATO military alliance. A 1951 treaty gave the U.S. a significant role in Greenland's defense, and about 1953, construction began on Thule Military Base, now known as Pituffik Space Base, located in northwest Greenland. While the U.S. military frequently takes part in NATO exercises in Greenlandic waters, the Danish Prime Minister has repeatedly stated that annexation of Greenland by the U.S. will effectively end the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, or NATO. Defense of Greenland's independence. Political status. Greenland Self-Government Act, Chapter 8, Greenland's Access to Independence. The decision on Greenland's independence shall be made by the Greenlandic people. In case of such decision, pursuant to subsection 1, negotiations are initiated between the government and Naalakkersuisut for the purpose of implementing independence for Greenland. An agreement between Naalakkersuisut and the government on the implementation of independence for Greenland shall be made with the consent of Inatsisartut and shall be approved by a referendum in Greenland. Any agreement shall be in addition with the consent of the Danish Parliament. Independence for Greenland entails that Greenland assumes sovereignty over Greenland. Greenland is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. In 1953, Denmark formally added what was then its colony to the kingdom. The Greenlandic government has authority over Greenland's internal affairs such as the economy, social services, and infrastructure, while Denmark is responsible for the island's foreign affairs, defense, citizenship, currency, and monetary policy. The Danish Supreme Court is the final court of appeal. Under Danish law, Greenlandic independence is possible at any time based on the Self-Government Act of 2009 after a referendum in Greenland and approval by the Danish Parliament. Others question this, arguing that an amendment of the Danish constitution is required. Denmark has sovereignty over Greenland. Private land ownership does not exist. Any agreement to allow for independence would transfer sovereignty from Denmark. The Greenlandic government declared in February 2024 that independence is its goal. and independence is expected to be the most important issue at the April 2025 Greenlandic general election. Due to its status as a former colony, some commentators have argued that under international law, Greenland has, separate from the 2009 law, right of self-determination and could make a unilateral declaration of independence. The position of the Danish government is that it is up to Greenland to decide its own future, and that Denmark would respect a Greenlandic referendum on independence. The Danish government reluctantly agreed in 2017 to finance 2 new airports, replacing potential Chinese investors, even though the investments sought by the island are viewed as preparing for independence. Greenland gives Denmark a role in the Arctic. It is a member of the Arctic Council, and as one of the 5 Arctic littoral states, a signatory to the Ilulissat Declaration. Icelandic scholar Gudmundur Alfredsson said that the island should consider Denmark one of several competitors for it, and that the United States or Canada might provide more funding. Rasmus Leander Nielsen of the University of Greenland said that the Greenlanders have discussed since the 1980s of creating a compact of free association with Denmark after independence, and that some have suggested a compact of free association with the United States instead. Several Pacific nations with populations similar in size to Greenland's have COFAs. Current Greenlandic Minister of Foreign Affairs Miningwak Kleist visited the Cook Islands affiliated with New Zealand in 2006. Defense. Greenland does not have its own military. As a territory of Denmark, the Danish military is responsible for Greenland's defense, and the island is within the area overseen by the NATO military alliance. The Joint Arctic Command is the Danish military branch responsible for Greenland. In 2020, Denmark's Arctic Command had 4 ships, 4 helicopters, 1 maritime patrol aircraft, and 6 dog sled teams to patrol the island. The Danish military has personnel based at Nuuk, Kongerlussuaq, Danneborg, Station Nord, Mestersvig, Gronedal, and a liaison detachment at Thule Air Base. Because of Greenland, it is among the few nations to have liaison officers at Stratcom headquarters, Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. In 2019, Denmark announced that it would spend a further 1.5 billion kroner to monitor Greenland. Denmark in December 2024 announced plans to build up its military presence in Greenland with more personnel, patrol ships, long-range drones, and upgrading an airport to handle Danish F-35 fighter aircraft. This followed American demands for more Danish defense spending, including by the first Trump administration. Alex Gray, United States National Security Council Chief of Staff during the first Trump administration, said Danes, quote, understand they don't have the ability to defend Greenland post-independence, unquote. Denmark's active duty military is smaller than the New York Police Department. The United States accepted the legal obligation to defend against any attack on Greenland in a 1951 treaty with Denmark. It has had bases there since the Second World War. The 1951 Greenland Defense Agreement allowed the United States to keep its military bases on Greenland and to establish new bases or defense areas if deemed necessary by NATO. The U.S. military was not to infringe upon Danish sovereignty in Greenland, but the treaty gave the United States permanent jurisdiction over the defense areas of Thule, Sonderstrom, and Narsarsuaq, and American forces could freely use and move between them. As of 2025, the only U.S. military base in Greenland is Pitufik Space Base, formerly Thule Air Base. The 2004 Igaliku Agreement stated that the U.S. must inform Denmark and Greenland of any proposed changes. Thus, the U.S. cannot increase its military presence without consent from Denmark and Greenland. Greenlandic governments have said they would seek to join NATO if Greenland becomes an independent country, and welcome increased United States interest and investment as long as it is respectful of sovereignty and Greenland's right to self-determination. Economy. As of 2021, Greenland's annual GDP was $3 billion, 0.007% that of the United States. Its working age population is estimated to decline by 16% by 2040. As of 2017, Denmark is by far Greenland's largest trade partner, receiving 55% of the island's exports and providing 63% of imports. As of 2023, it subsidizes Greenland with 5.6 billion kroner annually, up from 3.6 billion kroner in 2009. The island's largest private industry is fishing, covering an area of 2,166,086 square kilometers. It has vast natural resources, including uranium, rare earth metals, and an estimated 50 billion barrels of offshore oil and gas. Greenland has only one operating mine and little infrastructure. However, it has one commercial international airport and no roads connect the 17 towns. One resident reported that flying from Nuuk to Qaqortoq, 280 miles away, requires 2 planes over 2 days and is more expensive than flying to Copenhagen. 43% of Greenlanders work for the government compared to 15% in the United States. The island's per capita disposable income is the lowest in the Arctic other than Russia's and less than one-third that of the American state of Alaska. However, life expectancy of Alaskan natives is extremely low at 68 years, far lower than that of Greenlandic natives in Greenland, thereby suggesting that the wealth generated through mining and defense contracts in Alaska has not trickled down to the indigenous people of Alaska. Danish investors have little presence in Greenland, although 1/5 of Greenlanders live in Denmark. Denmark has relinquished control over raw materials to the island, so has little interest in its resources. The island has one of the world's largest neodymium deposits near Narsaq, but the Inuit do not have a history of mining, so outside workers would be needed. Inuit Ataqatigiit won the 2021 Greenlandic general election with an ecological platform opposing the deposit's development and ending hydrocarbon and uranium exploration. The ban also applies to any minerals with a certain amount of the metal blocking non-uranium exploration since 2009. The ban reverberated geopolitically. Kvanefjeld's developer near Narsaq, an Australian firm now known as Energy Transition Minerals, counted a Chinese state-linked company as its largest shareholder. Although Greenlandic officials have approached dozens of Canadian and Australian mining companies, many are hesitant. The Kvanefjeld dispute may dissuade the American investors that the government also welcomes. Because of the lack of infrastructure, all mining projects are greenfield land and investors need to build new roads, ports, and power plants. As of March 2025, the island has only 2 active mines, one for gold that is being commissioned and one owned by Lumina Sustainable Materials for anorthosite, a ruby mine closed in 2024 after bankruptcy. Javier Blas of Bloomberg wrote in 2025 that hyperbole around Greenland and commodities has a 50-year-long history, noting that Greenland had never produced any petroleum and the attempt to mine iron ore ended in bankruptcy. A majority of possible mineral sites are north of the Arctic Circle. Those south of the circle are mostly small, with Tanbreeze among the exceptions. As of 2023, the United States only imported $190 million in rare earths. If prices rose, they could be obtained more easily from American and other deposits than from Greenland. Blas urged the United States to focus on the African copper belt and elsewhere as more important. Investing in Greenland is not for the faint of heart, CEO Brian Hanrahan of Lumina said, stating that the anorthosite mine was more complex than any of the 270 worldwide sites he oversaw at another job. A 2014 report stated that replacing the Danish subsidy would require 24 large projects, each costing 5 billion kroner, one opening every 2 years. As no investors existed for such projects, the report by 13 scholars said that Greenland would remain independent on the subsidy for at least 25 years to maintain its welfare system. Minnick Thorleif Rosing, one of the authors in 2025, said that the situation had not changed. Even if you had an unrealistically high rate of development of mineral resources, it would be unlikely to replace more than half the annual block grant from Denmark in any near future. American goals of acquisition. The goals of American arguments and commentaries for the acquisition of Greenland, either diplomatically, economically, or militarily, has been defended from various perspectives, which are often not in full agreement with each other. Defense of the mainland United States. An acquisition of Greenland would give the United States control of an island that it sees as crucial to its defense. Reuters described Greenland in October 2020 as a security black hole for the United States and allies, and said its 27,000 miles of coastline was difficult to monitor. On several occasions since 2006, foreign vessels have turned up unexpectedly or without the necessary protocols in waters that NATO member Denmark aims to defend, the news agency reported. Detection of foreign vessels, including a Russian submarine, has often been by chance. A potential security threat are Russian ships believed to have the ability to tap undersea cables or sever them during a conflict. A 2021 study by the Rand Corporation expressed concern that Greenland could be seduced into Russia's or China's orbit were it to attain independence from Denmark. Speaking in 2025, Rasmus Sindig Sondergaard of the Danish Institute for International Studies said that the United States had legitimate security concerns in Greenland that Denmark had persistently failed to adequately safeguard. Russia is much more capable of Arctic land combat than the United States, and Greenland may be vulnerable to invasion. Control of the GIUK Gap. The United States views the control of the GIUK Gap, or Greenland-Iceland-UK Gap, as critical to the maritime defense of eastern North America. A wartime priority of the United States is to close the gap or prevent an adversary navy from exiting the Norwegian Sea and approaching North America via the North Atlantic. In 1957, the United States led Exercise Strikeback, the largest peacetime naval exercise in history, focused on stopping an aggressive Orange fleet from transiting the gap, which was to be accomplished by means of a naval blockade involving hundreds of warships. During much of the Cold War, the importance of closing the gap was to prevent Soviet SSBNs from sailing within firing range of Washington, D.C. and New York City. With the improvement of Soviet and later Russian missile ranges, the importance of gap control lessened, however, again became a priority in the early 21st century as the threat of hybrid warfare increased. Russia increased naval activity there as part of greatly expanding its Arctic presence. It has increased cooperation with China, which wants a polar Silk Road. NATO annually undertakes Exercise Northern Viking, and in 2024 involved the United States Sixth Fleet, the Standing Naval Forces, the Icelandic Police, and Icelandic Coast Guard focused on responding to a threat against the integrity of the gap. Security of air approaches. The United States considers Greenlandic airspace to be vital to the air defense of North America. The United States has demanded that Denmark provide better airspace surveillance over Greenland, and in 2022, a study by RAND suggested integrating Greenland into the North American Aerospace Defense Command as a means of enhancing domain awareness. Stability of space defense programs. Contemporary military operations have become dependent on polar orbiting satellites, according to Space News, addressing the matter of Greenland. Quote, any satellite in a polar or sun-synchronous orbit, such as those in critical communications, imagery, and weather monitoring constellations, requires an Arctic ground station for consistent tracking, telemetry, and control throughout every revolution, unquote. The United States Space Force Base in Greenland, Patuxent Space Base, is one of only 2 Arctic facilities available to the United States, the other being Clear Space Force Station in Alaska. The potential loss of Patuxent Space Base following the independence of Greenland would leave the United States with no redundancy and, according to Space News, have serious consequences for both a future conflict and business as usual in orbit. On 9 January 2025, U.S. Representative Mike Herodopoulos issued a statement supporting U.S. acquisition of Greenland on grounds of space security, commenting, quote, it's a critical part of ensuring our nation's security now and in the future. America cannot afford to cede an inch in space or the Arctic, unquote. Earlier in July 2024, United States Army Lieutenant General Thomas Cardin, commenting on the deployment of military space assets, described the Arctic as the shortest and least defended threat vector to North America. Access to natural resources. The United States may gain access to vast amounts of natural resources, including petroleum and rare minerals. The United States Geological Survey estimates 17.5 billion barrels of offshore crude oil and 4.19 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. The island has the largest deposits of rare earth elements outside China. 2/3 of the planet's fresh water outside Antarctica are frozen in Greenland, and its rock floor has unusually strong ability for soil regeneration and direct air capture of carbon. Experts predict that 5% of global shipping could use Arctic shipping routes by 2050. Climate change may, by 2030, make the Northern Sea Route the first of the routes to be ice-free, linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and making Greenland's resources more accessible. The Northwest Passage is 4,300 miles, or 4 days shorter from the U.S. East Coast to Asia, and U.S. West Coast to Europe than the Panama Canal. Such routes are 3/5 of the traffic through the canal. The first commercial ship traversed the passage in 2013, saving $200,000. 10 did so in 2024, and the passage may be open 4 months of the year by the end of the 21st century. Size of the territory. Impressed by the size of the island, Trump stated, "Look at the size of this. It's massive. That should be part of the United States." Speaking with his security advisor, he expressed thoughts that its acquisition would be a great real estate deal. If Greenland became part of the United States, the U.S. would become the second largest country in the world by area after Russia. It would be the largest territorial acquisition in American history, slightly larger than the Louisiana Purchase. All right. History. Early claims on Greenland. Paleo-Eskimo peoples had been living in Greenland Periodically, from around 2500 BC, Norsemen began settling the uninhabited southern part of Greenland from the 10th century AD. In 1261, the Norse settlements in southern Greenland accepted Norwegian overlordship. These colonies died out in the 1400s, but Norway's territorial claims to Greenland continued to be asserted by Denmark and Norway after the union of the Danish and Norwegian realms in 1537. Beginning in 1721, missionaries and traders from Denmark, Norway began recolonizing southern Greenland. In 1775, Denmark-Norway declared Greenland a colony. When Denmark and Norway separated in 1814, Greenland was kept by Denmark under the Treaty of Kiel. Denmark began trying to colonize all of Greenland in the 1880s and declared sovereignty over the whole island in 1921. The United States could have challenged Denmark's claim to Greenland. Much of northern Greenland had not been mapped when the Kiel Treaty was signed in 1814. During the Polaris expedition of the early 1870s, American Charles Francis Hall was the first outsider to see northwest Greenland, decades before Denmark's first permanent settlement in the Northwest in 1909. From 1886 to 1909, American Robert Peary was the first outsider to explore far northern Greenland and claimed much of the area for the United States. Despite the Treaty of Kiel, Norway had long used the east coast of the island and objected to the 1921 Danish Declaration. It stated that a 1924 agreement between the two countries did not endorse Danish sovereignty over the whole island, and in 1931 claimed eastern Greenland as Erik the Red's land. A 1933 International Court of Justice ruling recognized Danish sovereignty over the whole island. Norway abided by this ruling, though briefly renewed its claim during the Quisling regime in the 1940s. 1867 proposal. In 1867, United States Secretary of State William H. Seward negotiated the Alaska Purchase from the Russian Empire. He, that year, considered the idea of United States annexation of both Greenland and Iceland an idea worthy of serious consideration. Robert J. Walker, like Seward, an advocate of American expansionism, submitted to Seward a report by the United States Coast Survey that the Secretary of State had requested on the two islands. The government published the report. Seward wanted to encourage Americans to support a potential purchase offer, so the report very positively described Greenland's unusual healthfulness and large amounts of fish, game, and minerals. Annexation would also encourage Canada, between American territory to the east and west, to join the United States, the report predicted. In 1868, negotiations by the Secretary for purchasing both Greenland and Iceland from Denmark for $5.5 million in gold were reportedly nearly complete, but Seward made no offer, probably because Congress did not approve a treaty to acquire the Danish West Indies. President Andrew Johnson was very unpopular with Republicans in Congress, and although Seward was also a Republican, his association with Johnson made passing his proposals unlikely. 1910. A proposal for acquisition of Greenland was discussed within the American government in 1910 by United States Ambassador to Denmark Maurice Francis Egan. As suggested by Danish persons of importance who were friends of Egan, the United States would trade Mindanao and Palawan for Greenland and the Danish West Indies. Denmark could then trade Mindanao and Palawan to Germany for northern Schleswig. Denmark regained northern Schleswig from Germany after the German defeat in World War I following the 1920 Schleswig plebiscites. Treaty of the Danish West Indies. Another American attempt by the Danish West Indies failed in 1902, this time because the Danish Parliament did not pass the treaty. During the First World War, the United States again wanted to buy the Danish West Indies. Denmark wanted the United States to recognize the Danish claim over the whole of Greenland. United States Secretary of State Robert Lansing proposed that the two issues be combined. Denmark sold the Danish West Indies to the United States, which were renamed the United States Virgin Islands, and made an unincorporated territory of the United States. After the treaty, Lansing issued a declaration affirming that the U.S. will not object to the Danish government extending their political and economic interests to the whole of Greenland. John Douglas Hazen proposed at the Imperial War Conference that the British Empire buy Greenland for Canada to prevent the United States from acquiring it. The Imperial War Cabinet in 1917 declared that even a friendly nation obtaining Greenland would be undesirable to the Empire and especially to Canada, and that the Empire should obtain a right of first refusal for the island from Denmark when possible. According to Tom Hoyam, Britain in 1917 secured a right of first refusal from Denmark, although it is unclear if Hoyam's interpretation of the document could withstand legal scrutiny. Since 1823, the United States has, in the Monroe Doctrine, opposed expansion of foreign sovereignty in the Americas. Lansing's declaration was an exception to the doctrine and influenced other countries. In 1919, Denmark asked other nations to recognize its sovereignty over Greenland. Britain reiterated on behalf of Canada in September 1920 that it should be consulted before any sale. France, Japan, Italy, and Sweden had no reservations. The United States formally opposed the reservation, telling Britain that the United States government is not disposed to recognize the existence in a third government of a right of preemption to acquire this territory if the Danish government should desire to dispose of it, and accordingly reserves for the future consideration what position it may take in the event of a specific proposal for such transfer. Denmark formally declared sovereignty over all of Greenland in 1921. Norway renewed a claim to Erik the Red's land in 1931, but 2 years after the Parliament Court of International Justice ruled against the country, finding that the claim had been transferred to Denmark in 1814. Peary encouraged the United States to assert its claim to Greenland, believing that not doing so violated the Monroe Doctrine. He wanted to purchase the island for mineral wealth and to avoid foreign bases that would, as air and sea technology improved, threaten his country. During World War I, the United States decided that obtaining the Danish West Indies to defend the Panama Canal was more important. But in the 1920s, General Billy Mitchell advocated for expanding American air forces, wanted American bases in Greenland and Iceland. Second World War. In 1939, United States Secretary of State Cordell Hull's staff advised him not to offer to buy Greenland. United States Secretary of War Harry Woodring said that the island was too far from American sea or air routes. Within 1 year, however, the German invasion of Denmark on 9 April 1940 showed the American government that Peary had been correct about Greenland's importance to the Arctic policy of the United States. Before World War II, the island was part of Rainbow 4, a contingency plan to deal with a siege of North America in which the United States was simultaneously attacked from every direction by every great power. In Rainbow 4, American forces would preemptively seize all Dutch, Danish, and French possessions in the Western Hemisphere, including Greenland, and garrison them to form a defensive perimeter around the United States. Its conquest of Denmark now gave Germany a strong legal claim to Greenland. Britain and Canada were also possible foreign occupiers. Because of its proximity to mainland North America and being the only known significant source of cryolite, German attempts to use the island during the North Atlantic Weather War, the United States for the first time applied the Monroe Doctrine on European colonies in the North Atlantic Ocean. The U.S. landed armed United States Coast Guard personnel from USCGC Northland in Greenland to begin the occupation of Greenland. Prior to landing, the Coast Guardsmen were formally discharged from service and reconstituted as a force of volunteers to create a legal fiction that would avoid charges of American invasion of the country, the United States being neutral and the Danish government under German occupation not having agreed to the landing. On 9 April 1941, Hull and Danish ambassador to the United States, Henrik Kaufmann, signed the agreement relating to the defense of Greenland. The Americans stated that defending Greenland was consistent with the Monroe Doctrine and Act of Havana of 1940. On 13 April 1940, Hull reiterated to Britain and Canada the United States' 1920 objection to the British reservation. The United States Army began construction of Bluey West 1 in July 1941, the first of several bases. Kaufmann acted without the consent of his government, which considered the agreement to be void and recalled Kaufmann. He stayed in the United States, and after the war, the Danish government again recognized the good trader as ambassador to the country. Post-war efforts to repatriate U.S. forces. After the end of the war, Denmark expected U.S. forces to exit Greenland and was taken by surprise when the United States indicated that it had no intention of leaving. Over the next several years, Danish officials attempted, unsuccessfully, to convince the United States to leave the island. According to Jeroen van Dongen, a period of tension between the two countries followed as, despite its desires, quote, Denmark was clearly not in a position to force the USA to leave Greenland, unquote, nor did it have any means at its disposal to deny the US access to the territory. By spring 1948, Denmark gave up on persuading the Americans to leave. Part of why the country joined NATO, Trade Minister Jens Otto Krag wrote in his diary, was that since the USA's de facto partial occupation of Greenland would cause the Soviet Union, which we do not possess the power to prevent, would cause the Soviet Union to see his country as an American ally. Denmark should benefit from the relationship. Some Danes hoped that as a NATO member, the United States would discuss Greenlandic issues multilaterally or vacate the bases as Denmark was an ally, but such did not occur. 1946 proposal. In 1946, the Joint Chiefs of Staff listed Greenland and Iceland as two of the three essential international locations for American bases. During the creation of NATO, the two islands were seen as more important to American and Canadian defense than some Western European countries. Greenland is on the shortest polar route between Washington and Moscow, and about midway between the two cities. In 1946, the United States offered Denmark $100 million in gold bullion for Greenland. United States Senator Owen Brewster said in November 1945 that he considered buying the island, quote, a military necessity, unquote. The Planning and Strategy Committee of the Joint Chiefs of Staff determined in April 1946 that acquiring the completely worthless to Denmark island was vital to the United States. William C. Trimble of the State Department argued that while there are few people in Denmark who have any real interest in Greenland, economic, political, or financial, owning it would give the United States staging areas from which to launch military operations over the Arctic against America's adversaries. He suggested the $100 million price and discussed an alternate offer of land in Point Barrow, Alaska. Had the Alaska trade occurred from 1967, Denmark would have benefited from Prudhoe Bay oil field, the richest petroleum discovery in American history. Secretary of State James F. Burns made the $100 million offer on 14 December 1946 in a memorandum delivered to Danish Foreign Minister Gustav Rasmussen when he visited the United States. The memorandum described the American position on what to do about the informal 1941 agreement made in 1941 by Kaufman to station United States forces on Greenland. It suggested three alternatives: two variations on the 1941 agreement, a 99-year lease on the existing American bases there, or the United States wholly taking over the defense of the island, or the purchase of Greenland. The United States preferred to purchase and believed that doing so was better for Denmark, as it would prevent criticism of American bases on Danish soil and save Denmark the cost of supporting Greenland. The American told the Dane that a sale would be the most clean-cut and satisfactory. Our needs seemed to come as a shock to Rasmussen, Burns said. The memorandum indeed surprised the Dane. Rumors at the time stated that the United States wanted to purchase Greenland, but the Danish government's position was that the United States would withdraw its troops based upon language in the 1941 Kaufman Agreement, that it remained in force, quote, until agreement has been reached that the current threats to the peace and security of the American continent have ended, unquote. The Danish government understood that the threats were the World War. It did not know that the U.S. understood this to include post-war threats from the Soviet Union as well. Known as Article 10 of the Kaufman Agreement, the clause established that both sides would have to agree to ending it. Rasmussen declined all three options and returned to Denmark. He told United States Ambassador Josiah Marvel, quote, while we owe much to America, I do not feel that we owe them the whole island of Greenland, unquote. The American offer surprised Rasmussen because of duplicity by Kaufman, who, with a friend at the United States Department of State, advocated for an American presence in Greenland while not fully informing the Danish government. Kaufman had minimized in his reports the importance of proposals of a takeover or purchase in the United States House of Representatives, saying that the idea was considered ridiculous by the U.S. government when in fact it was not. He had also not conveyed important parts of a 1945 American proposal to keep its bases on the island after the war. Rasmussen visited Washington in 1946, expecting to annul the 1941 agreement, not understanding because of Kaufman's duplicity why nothing had happened with the Danish government's previous overtures in that regard. Reporting on the United States military's interest in purchasing it, Time in January 1947 stated that Lansing had erred in relinquishing the American claim to the world's largest island and stationary aircraft carrier. The magazine predicted that Greenland would be as valuable as Alaska during the next few years for defense. Time observed that despite national pride, Denmark owes U.S. investors $70 million while the country has had a shortage of dollars, and rumors in Copenhagen stated that the price for the island would be $1 billion, or $11 billion today, or almost 4 times Denmark's aid from the Marshall Plan. Selling Greenland might have made a return to Denmark's traditional neutrality easier, and would have provided funds for the country greatly needed after the war. All Danish political parties rejected selling the island when they heard the rumors, however. Jens Sonderup said in a 1947 budget debate, quote, there have been rumors in the newspapers about America wishing to acquire Greenland. King Dollar is, so to speak, about to become a major factor in all areas. I am not aware of any approach concerning the purchase of Greenland, but assume that it is a given that we will not embark on anything in that respect. Should the Greenlanders desire another relationship or secession, that would be another matter, but in this respect there can be no question of any form of financial transaction, unquote. Rasmussen responded in the debate that the idea was absurd and declared Denmark unwilling in any way to cede sovereignty over Greenland. The West Indies were only an investment to Danes, but from the Danish Golden Age of the 19th century, they saw Danish overseas colonies in the North Atlantic, including Greenland, as part of their Viking history and national identity. The island was for Denmark, similar to the British Raj for the United Kingdom, and Danes felt a paternalistic, white man's burden-like responsibility for its people. While Greenland did not contribute to the Danish economy, Denmark planned to expand trade and resource extraction there. By offering to purchase Greenland, the United States told Denmark that it was not likely to ever leave. Denmark would not fully understand for another decade the island's strategic importance to the United States. The Danish government's own outlook on national security was more parochial and did not extend to viewing Greenland as a part of that. The legal status of the 1941 arrangement was unsettled, with the United States still pressing for purchase and Denmark rejecting the offer, leaving matters at the status quo ante until the 1960s. After the November 1947 Danish Folketing election, the new government of Hans Hedtoft continued and expanded Kaufmann's strategy of duplicity. To the Danish public, it maintained that the United States would withdraw from Greenland as expected. To the United States, the Hedtoft government stated that its own private position was that the American presence would remain. Its own private position was to persuade the United States to withdraw. Kaufmann likewise continued with his own personal agenda. The Danish government was not duplicitous on one point. It was not going to outright cede Greenland to a foreign power. Marvel told Rasmussen that he should not do anything that would lead to the disclosure of anything that had transpired in Rasmussen's meeting with Burns. The Danish government kept the American interests secret from the public as part of its own strategy. The 1947 offer was classified until the 1970s, and Jyllands-Posten reported on it in 1991. Cold War and 1955 proposal. A scholar wrote in 1950 that despite official denials of the rumors of an American purchase, because of Greenland's large expense to Denmark and strategic importance, the potential sale of the island to the United States remains a distinct possibility. Post-war Denmark was not able to defend Greenland, an ice-covered island 50 times larger than itself. In April 1951, Denmark and the United States signed the Greenland Defense Agreement. Replacing the 1941 agreement, it allows the latter country to keep its military bases in Greenland and to establish new bases or defense areas if deemed necessary by NATO. The American military can freely use and move between these defense areas but cannot infringe upon Danish sovereignty in Greenland. The agreement remains in force as long as the NATO treaty does. Denmark recognized that without the agreement, Greenland would become closer to the United States anyway, whether as a nominally independent country or with a Puerto Rico-like affiliation. The Pentagon told Dwight Eisenhower that the Danes were, quote, very cooperative in allowing the United States quite a free hand in Greenland, unquote. A Danish scholar later wrote that his country's sovereignty over the island during the Cold War was fictional, with the United States holding de facto sovereignty. The BBC wrote that in the 1951 agreement, quote, in effect gave the U.S. whatever it wanted, unquote. In 1955, the Joint Chiefs nonetheless proposed to Eisenhower that the nation again try to purchase Greenland, writing that sovereignty provides the firmest basis of assuring that a territory and its resources will be available for military use when needed. United States sovereignty over Greenland would remove any doubt as to the unconditional availability of bases. The State Department responded the time was long past when such a plan would be feasible because Greenland was constitutionally and psychologically an integral part of Denmark. An attempt to acquire the island might endanger American access and unnecessary because we are permitted to do almost anything literally that we wanted to. Circa 1953, in Operation Blue Jay, the United States built Thule Air Base in northern Greenland. From 1959, the island was part of NORAD. Thule employed more than 1,000 Greenlanders and had almost 10,000 American personnel. It and about 50 other American bases performed duties such as tracking Soviet submarines in the GIUK Gap. Camp Century was an experiment in polar engineering that presaged colonization of the moon. The canceled Project Iceworm would have deployed 600 Minuteman missiles under the ice. As the Portuguese Empire shrank, the Danish Empire with Greenland became the world's largest. During the 1970s, Vice President Nelson Rockefeller suggested buying Greenland for mining. The proposal was first publicly reported in 1982 by Rockefeller's speechwriter Joseph E. Persico in his book The Imperial Rockefeller. Writing in 1975, C.L. Sulzberger affirmed that it was the general American position that Greenland must be covered by the Monroe Doctrine, and opined it was impossible for the island to function independently, stating that 25% of the islanders suffered from venereal disease. In 1990, Patrick Buchanan suggested that American expansion to include Greenland was not so wild a dream and only required patience. United States interest abruptly declined after the Cold War. The NORAD radars were abandoned, though Thule, the United States' northernmost airbase, houses the network of sensors, which provides early missile warning and space surveillance and control. And since 2004, Thule has been the only United States base with a few hundred Americans. Post-Cold War United States disinterest in the island reportedly disappointed many Greenlanders. As late as 2004, proposals for American funding of climate research and scholarships did not succeed. 21st century. The United States, Russia, and China increased their attention to Greenland and Arctic geopolitics in the early 21st century. American Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, attended the 2010 Arctic 5 meeting. Rasmus Nielsen said in 2019, "The last couple of years we can see a bigger focus and also involvement that the U.S. wants to have in Greenland. You can feel that the U.S. is really waking up to Arctic reality, partly because of Russia, partly because of China." American ambassador to Denmark, James P. Kane, wrote in 2007 that Greenlandic independence was inevitable. His country had the opportunity to influence the structure of a new nation, so should prepare by directly communicating with Greenland as the island gains autonomy. Ongoing American educational, cultural, and scientific programs strengthened relations with the future country and kept China out, Kane wrote. The island is still important to American and NATO security. Walter Burbrick of the Naval War College said in 2019, quote, "Whoever holds Greenland will hold the Arctic. It's the most important strategic location in the Arctic and perhaps the world. The United States emphasizes Greenland's North American geography, and American diplomatic and military officials in the United States Geological Survey often visit the island. In 2018, the Americans reestablished the United States Second Fleet responsible for the North Atlantic. Burbrick proposed basing the fleet in Greenland, and Under Secretary of Defense for Policy John Rood signed an agreement to invest in dual-use infrastructure. Henrik Breitenbach of the University of Copenhagen said that the agreement, which Greenland welcomed, was part of increasing American emphasis on defending North America. The island could be where the United States builds the new strategic Arctic port that the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020 mandates. In 2019, Greenland asked the United States for an aerial survey. Planned before but occurring after the Trump administration purchase proposal, the United States Navy used hyperspectral imaging over Garor, and the USGS interpreted the data to search for mineral resources. Greenland, in April 2020, accepted a $12.1 million American grant. In December 2019, Denmark approved a Trump administration request for a consulate in Greenland. Opened during World War II and closed in 1953, the consulate reopened in June 2020, a day after the administration announced that it would build a new icebreaker fleet. Nick Solheim of the Wallace Institute for Arctic Security said that the two acts are, quote, "the most monumental things we've done in Arctic policy in the last 40 years, unquote. Proposals by Donald Trump. Since 2019, during his first term, and increasingly since being elected for his second term, Donald Trump has repeatedly asserted the claim that the United States should be in control of Greenland. He reportedly views a greater United States as both vital to national security and a way to strengthen his historical legacy as president, akin to how predecessor William McKinley acquired new territory for the United States. First presidency. Trump reportedly discussed acquiring Greenland since 2017. During his first presidency, Ron Lauder suggested to Trump that the United States purchase Greenland and offered to act as a back channel to the Danish government. Trump later claimed the idea was his personal inspiration and tasked National Security Advisor John Bolton to study it. Bolton tasked Fiona Hill to work on the proposal, assembled a small team to discuss options, and engaged in secret talks with Denmark's ambassador. Trump repeatedly suggested taking federal money for Puerto Rico to buy Greenland and discussed trading the island for the territory. Trump later told New York Times journalists Peter Baker and Susan Glasser in an interview for their book, The Divider, that he was enamored by the deal for the size of the island and thought it was a great real estate deal that would secure his place in history. Trump discussed the idea of purchasing Greenland with senior advisors, and Senator Tom Cotton, who proposed buying the island to Danish ambassador Lars Geert Loos in August 2018. Australian geologist Greg Barnes discussed the island's rare earths with 20 administration officials at the White House in July 2019. Supporters of an acquisition, including the Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs, reportedly discussed expanding American partnership with the island, including a possible purchase. One official stated that the United States can subsidize Greenland for much more than Denmark can. As of January 2020, the subsidy is less than the annual budget of El Paso, Texas. Cotton said that he suggested the purchase to the president because of the island's importance to American national security and great economic potential. When the Wall Street Journal reported on Trump's discussions in August 2019, Premier of Greenland, Kim Kielsen, Greenland's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Anne Lone Bagger, Greenlandic representatives in the Parliament of Denmark, Prime Minister of Denmark Mette Frederiksen, previous Prime Minister and opposition leader Lars Løkke Rasmussen, and members of other parties all rejected a sale. Statements ranged from simple diplomatic comments to strong refusals, calling the idea of a sale of Greenland and its people, quote, completely ridiculous. Some suggested that Trump's proposal had to be a joke. Frederiksen, already in Greenland, said, quote, this is an absurd distraction, as Greenland is not for sale. Greenland is not Danish. Greenland is Greenlandic, unquote. The Prime Minister emphasized Denmark's desire to continue close Denmark-United States relations, stating that she was open to increasing the American military presence. On 20 August 2019, Trump canceled a planned state visit of the United States to Denmark over Frederiksen's remarks rejecting the possibility of a sale. The cancellation came shortly after Carla Sands, the American ambassador, tweeted that, quote, Denmark is ready for the POTUS at real Donald Trump visit, partner, ally, friend, unquote, and reportedly surprised and bewildered the Danish government. The Danish government quickly communicated its support of American policy, including in the Arctic. The following day, Frederiksen invited stronger cooperation with the United States on Arctic affairs. After reiterating that Greenland was not for sale, Frederiksen repeated her statement about the importance of the United States alliance in English to ensure that American officials heard her words. The Danish attempt to placate the larger country apparently worked. Later that day, United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo phoned Danish Foreign Minister Jeppe Kofod, praising the Danish-American cooperation in the Arctic region and the alliance between the two countries. Both also confirmed their intentions of strengthening the cooperation in the region. Danish analyst Christian Moritzen said that Pompeo helped Frederiksen smooth things out with Trump, averting what was becoming a very big problem for Denmark. A diplomat in Beijing said that Trump was likely thinking of China when he offered to purchase Greenland. The president's interest showed that the United States does not intend to leave, which Greenland can do nothing about. Neither can Denmark since 1941, Bo Lidegaard said. That's just how it is in a world where ultimately the strongest are the ones to decide, with China and Russia worse alternatives, he added. Andreas Boij-Forsby of the University of Copenhagen said that Trump's interest was a very clear signal to both China and Denmark that Greenland is part of an exclusive American strategic zone. Admiral Niels Wang, former head of the Royal Danish Navy, said Trump's approach may be wacky, but it does send a serious message to Russia and China. Don't mess with us on Greenland. This is a complete game changer, unquote. American purchase supporters do not mention the Greenlandic independence movement in official documents to avoid annoying the Danish. Because the island can declare independence, it can affiliate with the United States. Quote, the only way Trump would be able to buy Greenland would be to give them an offer they couldn't turn down, unquote. Ulrich Pram-Gad of Aalborg University said. John Robert Clemenson of the Royal Danish Defence College predicted difficult negotiations for Denmark. He expected the island to seek diplomatic and financial benefits from Denmark and the United States, and Greenland and the United States possibly to negotiate bilaterally. Agreeing that they should negotiate without Denmark, the London Globalist suggested that the United States should make clear that this subsidy will be enlarged enormously, however blunt and unseemly this instrument may be. Islanders could use the possibility of American affiliation when negotiating with Denmark, said Thorsten Boring Olsen of Aarhus University. Paul Krarup, editor-in-chief of Sermitsiak, said that the American interest started a new domestic debate that might result in the island becoming more autonomous or independent from Denmark. He said that Greenlanders do not want to sell to the United States, but want to cooperate as an equal partner, suggesting that Trump visit the island instead of Denmark to negotiate. While a majority of Greenlanders prefer Denmark to the United States, most prefer the latter to China. Another Greenlander hoped that Trump's interest would cause Denmark to wake up and show Greenland some respect. A lot of Danes think everyone here is just a drunk Inuit. But now that America wants to buy us, maybe they can see there is much of value here. A third said that, quote, for hundreds of years, Danes earned many, many billions of kroner from Greenland, unquote, while neglecting Greenlanders, and hoped that American attention would give them more power when negotiating with Denmark. Krarup said that Greenlanders were also angry at Denmark for discussing Greenland without them. While Trump needed to change his attitude, Krarup hoped that the president's interest would change the island's political situation. Among Greenlandic politicians, Folketing MP Aja Chemnitz Larsen said that the Danish government was already treating her island differently because of Trump. Fredriksson's "Greenland is not Danish, Greenland is Greenlandic" statement was, Gad said, the first time a Danish prime minister said that the island had some control over foreign or security issues. Pelle Broberg of Parti Nalarak stated that with the American willingness to replace Danish subsidy, Greenland had an alternative Danish disinterest in Greenlandic independence. While rejecting a purchase, he said that Denmark was not better than the United States, which already can do what it wants in Greenland. He proposed that the island begin the process in Danish law of becoming independent and negotiate directly with the United States for American military and financial support. Steen Linge of the Democrats agreed, stating that Greenland should use Trump's offer to become independent of the Danish subsidy. Telly Martinussen of the Cooperation Party disagreed with replacing the Danish subsidy with another country's, and warned of risks to the island's education and healthcare with the United States affiliation. Describing Broberg's proposal as inappropriate, Siumut stated that Greenland needed to become independent without any subsidy, and that the island should cooperate more with Denmark and the United States. The Atasut party said that remaining with the Danish kingdom was preferable with the subsidy. Other Danish assistance and Folketing representation among benefits Greenland would lose with the American affiliation. Soren Espersen of the Danish People's Party called Broberg naive for wanting to leave the kingdom, stating that the United States will swallow Greenland in a single mouthful after independence and would not replace the Danish subsidy. Former Foreign Minister Martin Lidegaard of the Danish Social Liberal Party also advised against Greenland negotiating for an American subsidy, as the United States is not a type of nation that gives us something for free. Akaluk Linge, former head of the Inuit Circumpolar Conference, opposed affiliating with the United States, describing the offer as an attack on Danish sovereignty and Greenlandic independence. Islanders hoped that the publicity from Trump's interest would increase outside investment and tourism in Greenland. A real estate company in Nuuk reported that international inquiries rose from 1 or 2 a year to 10 in the week after Trump's proposal. Krarup said that the president had done us a service. He has made Greenland known throughout the world. The best advertisement we could get. The island needs American investment and subsidies for airports, roads, and the United States air routes, Krarup said, which would also make Greenland more independent from Denmark. After the president joked that he would not build a Trump Tower there, Nordic travel agencies saw significantly more interest in tourism on the island. Krarup said that the Greenlanders enjoyed the joke and interpreted it as Trump saying he does not want to destroy Greenlandic culture. Greenland's Tourism Bureau listed Trump's offer and previous American interest in the island on its website. Martin Lidegaard, Weekendavisen, Breitenbach, and Hans Moritzen of the Danish Institute for International Studies were among those who said that Trump forced Denmark to not ignore Greenland as usual and imagine the two apart. Kielsen and Fredriksson likely will support additional American bases. Breitenbach said that because the United States is his country's most important security partner, he described it as a nightmare for Denmark the possibility of Trump demanding it choose between fulfilling the Wales Summit Declaration of defense spending as 2% of GDP or keeping Greenland. Whether the island is independent or affiliated with Denmark or America, Breitenbach said, the United States would continue military supremacy and to restrict foreign investments that affect national security. Reopening its consulate increased American influence on islanders and was consistent with Kane's 2007 proposal for directly communicating with Greenland. Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, said that reopening it was, quote, the culmination of the administration's efforts to strengthen our engagement in the Arctic region, unquote. Larson said in October 2019 that the consulate was part of a massive charm offensive from the U.S. and soft power and diplomacy, and that because of Danish neglect of its responsibilities in Greenland, a majority on the island might support American annexation in 5 to 10 years. Espersen in November accused Greenlandic Finance Minister Vitus Quajikitsok of secret bilateral negotiations with American officials, defying Danish authority over foreign and security policy. As part of the American Charm Offensive, ambassadors since Kane in 2007 had, Espersen said, quote, methodically prepared for the day when Greenland declares itself independently so that the U.S. can move in on the island at the same time, unquote. He asked Greenland to choose between Denmark and the United States. Quajikitsok denied the claim and said that his schedule of American meetings was public, while criticizing Espersen for distrusting the island's officials. Martin Lidegaard said that the United States had aggressive interest in Greenland and in the Arctic. During a 2021 interview, Trump said that following the Wall Street Journal's public leak of the proposal in August 2019, the Danish government, quote, lost their political courage, unquote. Tom Dans, a Trump appointee to the United States Arctic Research Commission, said in 2025 that he worked on Greenland until the last day of the first Trump administration. Second presidency, November 2024 to March 2025. The Biden administration encouraged Western mining investment in Greenland. In 2024, American and Danish officials reportedly told geologist Barnes's company, Tanbreeze Mining, developer of the island's largest rare earth deposit, not to sell the project to Chinese developers. Tanbreeze sold the project to Critical Metals of the United States, reportedly for much less than what the Chinese offered. The U.S. pressure is akin to similar American efforts to block Chinese influence in Africa's copper belt. A week before Trump's re-election in November 2024, Nick Solheim of American Moment, a group preparing for the transition, said that the proposal had been serious. He reportedly cited the Homestead Act, implying that the government would encourage American settlement of the island. Shortly after the election, Trump ally Representative Mike Collins posted a picture of Greenland in an electoral college map as voting Republican in Project 2029, suggesting Trump would make another bid to purchase Greenland during his second term. Buying Greenland appeared on a list of foreign policy goals that the incoming administration prepared after the election, and the transition team began discussing business opportunities in Greenland with private industry, including Critical Metals. Gadd said that Greenland had discussed the relationship with the two previous American administrations and was aware that the U.S. will never leave. On 22 December 2024, Trump posted to Truth Social that the United States' ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity, citing reasons of national security and freedom throughout the world. He did so while announcing the appointment of Ken Howery as ambassador to Denmark. Howery previously served as United States ambassador to Sweden. Donald Trump's son, Eric Trump, in a post on X with the caption, quote, "We are so back," unquote, showed map outlines of the Panama Canal, Greenland, and Canada as items in an Amazon shopping cart, along with an image of his father looking at his phone with the same screen open. Responding to these statements, Greenlandic Premier Mute Borup Egede wrote, "Greenland is ours. We are not for sale and will never be for sale. We must not lose our long struggle for freedom." Denmark's Fredriksen repeated her comments from 2019. Danish Minister of Defense Troels Lund Poulsen, following Trump's comments, announced an increase in spending on defense in Greenland of a double-digit billion amount in krona, between $876 million and $8.7 billion US dollars. In his first speech of 2025, King Frederick X appeared to rebuke Trump's offers of owning Greenland when he stated, quote, "We are all united and each of us committed for the Kingdom of Denmark, from the Danish minority in South Schleswig and all the way to Greenland. We belong together," unquote. The royal household also ordered the changing of the royal arms of Denmark to include Greenland more significantly in the arms. After Trump's Christmas message on Greenland, Greenlandic Minister of Finance Erik Jensen invited the president-elect to the island as Siumut chairman and not on behalf of the government. On 7 January, Donald Trump Jr. arrived in Greenland, but did not meet with Jensen or the Greenlandic government. His guide was Jorgen Boesen, a pro-Trump Islander who intends to run in the April 2025 election on a pro-United States platform, although he also stated his opposition to American acquisition of Greenland. Trump Jr. arrived ahead of his father's press conference in Florida, where Trump announced that he would institute very high tariffs against Denmark if it resisted attempts to make Greenland a U.S. territory, questioned the legal status of Danish sovereignty in Greenland, and refused to rule out economic or military action against Denmark if they refused, citing national and economic security reasons. Egede urged calm among Greenlanders. The announcements yesterday are, of course, worrying. However, it is necessary that we as a nation do not act hastily. Trump might use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 to raise tariffs on Danish goods, such as Novo Nordisk's drug Ozempic. A 2024 study estimated that the GDP of Denmark would decline by 3% if the United States imposed 10% tariffs on European Union imports. Conversely, a deal with Denmark over Greenland might include favorable Medicare and Medicaid treatment for Danish pharmaceuticals. On 16 January, the CEOs of major Danish companies Novo Nordisk, Vestas, and Carlsberg, among others, assembled for a crisis meeting in the Ministry of State to discuss the situation. Trump Jr.'s arrival in Nuuk was greeted by a crowd of local residents, some of whom were opposed to annexation but attended because, quote, "it's exciting to have visitors from America," unquote. Donald Trump telephoned a luncheon Trump Jr. had at Hotel Hans Egede with local Nook residents, including homeless and otherwise socially vulnerable residents, and a Nook drug dealer, in which he proclaimed that Greenland, quote, is a very special place, unquote, and that the United States would, quote, treat you well. Employees of the Brugseni supermarket affirmed that Trump Jr.'s public relations team distributed MAGA hats to people outside the supermarket and offered these people a free lunch at the hotel, and that several of these people appeared in Trump Jr.'s promotional picture of his visit. One local attendee said that Trump Jr.'s team had invited him to eat at the best local restaurant. Trump Jr. said that Danes were racist towards Greenlanders and treated them poorly, agreeing with Chemnitz and Lok. On 14 January, the Trump-affiliated Nelk Boys also visited Godtab, handing out dollar bills to locals. Fredrickson's priority is maintaining good relations with the Americans because of the Greenland map barter that has been vital to her country's security for 80 years, and because the United States is Denmark's largest trading partner. She requested an audience with Trump. Her government privately reiterated to Trump aides that the island is not for sale, but that it will discuss increasing the United States military presence or any other request. Denmark wants to convince Trump that the United States does not need to possess Greenland. On 15 January, Fredrickson and Trump held a 45-minute phone conversation, whereafter Fredrickson stated there is no reason to believe Trump to not be serious in his statements about his increasing interest in Greenland. 2 days later, Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen told Politiken, "It's not as if I think it was good that she had that conversation, because then that problem is solved." The Financial Times reported that 5 current and former senior European officials briefed on the call said the conversation had gone very badly. One said, the intent was very clear, they want Greenland, and another said, the Danes are utterly freaked out about this. Trump reportedly threatened, according to the sources, targeted tariffs against Denmark. Fredrickson's office said it did not recognize the interpretation of the conversation given by anonymous sources. United States Senator John Fetterman said that while he opposed, quote, taking it by force, unquote, acquisition along the same model used for the Louisiana Purchase or the Alaska Purchase would be a reasonable conversation to have. Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska said to buy Greenland if the price is right, but that his state offers all of Greenland's benefits. Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado, was open to the proposal if it's the choice of the people of Greenland. Bolton said that while he supported the ultimate objective of the United States annexation of Greenland, he disagreed with the way Trump was handling it and felt it needed a more sensitive and delicate approach. While yet reiterating that the island's goal was independence, Greenlandic Parliament member Kuno Fenker said that a COFA with the United States and Denmark was possible, stating that Greenland's economy needs to be diversified, so Donald Trump Jr. and even his father and other members of the incoming administration from the U.S. are extremely welcome here in Greenland as visitors, and also maybe more officially in the future. Fenker and Boson met with Dans when later arrived in Nuuk on 11 January. On 30 January 2025, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed that when Trump said he wanted to buy Greenland, it was, quote, not a joke, unquote. Trump believed that Denmark would eventually give in. Statements by Trump and American officials prompted what the Copenhagen Post described as a widespread concern in Denmark. Fredrickson met with the opposition leaders on 9 January to discuss the crisis. Opposition MP Rasmus Jarlov criticized her stance that Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders and had control over its future, saying that Fredrickson should have more emphatically stated that Denmark opposed U.S. annexation of Greenland. All left parties in the Danish parliament support Greenlandic independence, while the right is divided. Denouncing Greenlandic fantasists, Morten Messerschmidt, Danish People's Party leader, said Greenlanders would prefer Denmark's social programs to those of the United States. Quote, Greenland will never gain independence. We might as well say that. Greenland will never ever get independence, unquote, he said, adding that Trump would have to negotiate with Denmark, not Greenland. On 14 January, Messerschmidt took part in a pro-Israeli conference held at Mar-a-Lago, but did not succeed in meeting Trump on the matter, instead talking to his former wife, Marla Maples. The Red-Green Alliance said that Denmark should suspend a 2023 agreement allowing American troops on Danish soil. A spokesman for Fredrickson Social Democrats rejected doing so, stating that the United States was vital to NATO and Danish security. Speaking on 17 January, former Chief Executive Friis Arne Petersen in the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs described the situation as historically unheard of, while Noah Reddington, special advisor to former Prime Minister Helle Thorning-Schmidt, compared the international pressure on Denmark to that during the Jyllands-Posten Mohammed cartoons controversy in 2005. The Trump offer gave Greenland the ability to use the United States and Denmark against each other. Jakob Karsbo, formerly with the Danish Defense Intelligence Service, said Trump was absolutely capitalizing on Greenland's push for independence. I can easily see a scenario where Greenland moves away from Denmark after the upcoming elections. Peter Viggo Jacobsen of the University of Southern Denmark said that if Trump offered more money than the current Danish subsidy, I can easily imagine that a majority of the population will declare independence. Greenlandic cabinet minister Naja Nathanielsen said that her government had for years sought more cooperation with the United States or European Union, and that she rarely spoke to Danish media about her island's natural resource, the forced IUD case, or separation of Greenlandic children and parents in Denmark. Her island would use the Great Danish and worldwide attention from Trump's interest to settle the scandal, she said, reiterating that, quote, "we are not Danes nor Americans," unquote. Nathanielsen asked for a more American mining and infrastructure investment in a Washington Post op-ed, stating that Canadian and British companies held most licenses. Gadd said that Denmark might now be willing to continue subsidizing Greenland for some time after independence. On 9 January 2025, Trump wrote, "The people of Greenland would love to become an American state. Denmark maybe doesn't like it, but then we can't be too happy with Denmark," unquote. While stating his opposition to joining the United States, Broberg said that Trump's interest in Greenland had confirmed the island's importance and that other nations could help it become independent. Many Danish professionals on the island did not speak Greenlandic, he said, and that an independent Greenland would teach English instead of Danish. And then it would not matter so much whether it is an American or an Englishman or a third person who speaks English who is going to be a doctor or teacher. Then you will actually be able to communicate with each other. On 11 January, leaders of all 5 parties in Inatsisartut, or the Parliament of Greenland, refused the idea of becoming part of the U.S., though expressing an interest in maintaining a good relationship with the country. Some European leaders also expressed concern at Trump's increasing adamance in the annexation of Greenland. Speaking for the Russian Federation, Dmitry Peskov declared the Arctic a zone of our national interests and indicated Russia's opposition to changes in the status quo. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot warned Trump against threatening the European Union's borders. Chancellor of Germany Olaf Scholz, in a post on X, stated, "There is an uneasiness regarding recent statements from the U.S." Also, Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, and UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy have reacted negatively to the acquisition wishes of the Trump administration. Jacques Hartmann of Dundee University Law School wrote that even if the Danish parliament voted against Greenlandic independence, Denmark would not stop secession because of the island's right to unilaterally declare independence, which the United States would likely recognize. Greenlandic Premier Egede canceled a planned audience with Frederick X, scheduled to coincide with the date of Trump Jr.'s visit, in what officials attributed to a scheduling conflict, but the Copenhagen Post noted was, quote, "not a normal occurrence," unquote. The meeting with the king was shortly after rescheduled and took place 4 hours later than initially planned. Royal historian Sebastian Olden Jorgensen said that Egede rescheduled the meeting to prove that he did not bow to Denmark. At a previously scheduled joint press conference on 10 January, Fredrickson and Egede said that the incoming Trump administration had not contacted either. "The status quo is not an option," the latter said. "Greenland is for the Greenlandic people. We do not want to be Danish. We do not want to be American. We want to be Greenlandic." But he understood America's strategic interest in his island. Egede said he wanted to be able to speak to a foreign leader without a Danish ambassador present. Elizabeth Svan of Politiken thought that Egede had recently become less strident, describing his tone as, "Yes, we want independence, but in the long run." Back in Greenland, Mark Leibovich wrote that Egede seemed overwhelmed, regretting the sudden immense global interest Trump's interest had caused to him and his island. Fredrickson described American interest in Greenland as positive by causing the island and her country to reevaluate each other. She said that Greenlandic desire for independence was legitimate and understandable, but that she wanted the island to remain within the kingdom. Gadd stated that Fredrickson, unlike previous Danish governments, was not completely against a Danish COFA with Greenland. She might decide that, given the Trump discussion, a looser relationship with the island was better than completely losing Denmark's Arctic role, the scholar said. Dans and Boesen traveled to the United States on 13 January, having organized a Greenlandic delegation to the second inauguration of Donald Trump, while Broberg attended a watch party at Parliament of Trump's inauguration speeches formed in case the president would mention Greenland. He did not, but Broberg nonetheless welcomed Trump's interest, both for increasing the island's value and, Leibovich said, freaking out Denmark. On 26 January, Fredriksson had dinner with other Nordic leaders, and on 28 January, she met with Scholz, President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte to discuss the crisis. Citing the Northwest Passage, GIUK Gap, and missile defense, General Philip Breedlove said guaranteeing a western-leaning Greenland is extremely important, while stating that the United States did not need to own the island to do so and deploring the rough public conversation between the United States and Denmark. The former Sakyr said it is incredibly important that we do not allow Russian and Chinese influence to grow. Admiral James Stavridis said Greenland is an immensely valuable piece of real estate because of its strategic location, natural resources, and potential for post-climate change agriculture. Since he did not expect American acquisition of the island and advised against independence, the former Sakyr proposed that the United States improve the island's infrastructure, police, military, and tourism. Gadd, the offer of Greenland and Arctic security, said that while the GIUK Gap and Pittafik are important for American national security, neither the U.S. nor Danish and Greenlandic authorities have so far found anything that warrants further military buildup in Greenland. March 2025 to present. On 4 March 2025, Trump gave a speech before the United States Congress where he declared, one way or the other, we're going to get Greenland. In his 13 March 2025 meeting with NATO Secretary General Rutte, Trump suggested that he would be working with NATO when annexing Greenland, which he said he thought would happen. Rutte responded, saying that he wanted to leave that issue outside. I do not want to drag NATO into that, while agreeing with Trump on the need for Arctic security cooperation. On 14 March 2025, Jens Fredrik Nielsen, the leader of the Greenland Democrats that won the most seats in the 2025 Greenland general election, called for a grand coalition to show unity in the face of American annexation threats. The same day, leaders of all 5 parties in the Inatsisartut issued a joint statement rejecting Trump's repeated comments about annexation. Denmark's Prime Minister Fredriksson also issued a statement supporting the Greenlandic leaders. On 7 May 2025, the Danish government summoned the United States ambassador to Denmark, following a Wall Street Journal report that officials working for Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard had ordered the heads of the Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, and Defense Intelligence Agency to collect intelligence on Greenland's independence movement and the attitudes to American resource extraction efforts in the territory. In response, Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen said, "It worries me a lot because we don't spy between friends." On 27 August 2025, the Danish government again summoned the U.S. Charge d'Affaires Mark Stroh after at least 3 American citizens, allegedly with ties to Trump, were reported attempting to covert operations to foment secessionism. Danish media, including DR, reported that these 3 individuals were conducting influence operations in Greenland, such as collecting lists of American-friendly individuals, Trump critics, and arguments to use against Danish rule. As a result of the U.S. government's insistence on acquiring Greenland and causing diplomatic tensions between the 2 NATO members, the country's military intelligence agency has classified the United States as a potential threat to its national security and, more broadly, to Europe in its annual report, published on Wednesday, December 10. This is an unexpected conclusion in a country that has long considered itself one of Washington's closest partners. The report refers to the use of economic weapons, in particular tariffs, while also noting that Washington no longer rules out the possibility of resorting to force, even against one of its partners. On 22 December 2025, Trump announced that he had appointed Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry as special envoy to annex the territory, stating that, quote, "we have to have it," unquote, for national security. Greenland Prime Minister Jens Fredrik Nielsen reaffirmed in response that decisions about Greenland's future would be made on the island, and the position was supported by the European Union, France, and Canada. Denmark summoned the United States ambassador together with Greenland's representative to state their stance and ask for an explanation. After the U.S. bombed Venezuela and captured Nicolas Maduro on 3 January 2026, Trump reiterated his wish to acquire Greenland, stating that the U.S. needed Greenland for national security. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen responded by urging Trump to, quote, "stop threatening Greenland," and that a forcible American takeover of the island would mean the end of NATO. On 6 January, Mette Frederiksen and the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and the United Kingdom issued a statement jointly which opposes Trump's comments about acquiring Greenland. The foreign ministers of Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden also issued a statement which stated that matters concerning Greenland is for Greenland to decide alone. Make Greenland Great Again Act. On 13 January 2025, legislation was introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives by Rep. Andy Ogles to authorize the U.S. government to acquire Greenland on behalf of the United States, granting to Congress a 60-day review period prior to integration of Greenlandic territory into the United States. As of the date of introduction, the bill had 12 co-sponsors and had been referred to the United States House Committee on Foreign Affairs to review. Red, White, and Blue Land Act of 2025. On 10 February 2025, Representative Buddy Carter introduced a legislation which would rename Greenland to Red, White, and Blue Land and allow U.S. President Donald Trump to purchase or otherwise acquire Greenland. Carter further stated, "When our negotiator-in-chief signs his historic agreement, we will proudly welcome the people of what is now Greenland to join the freest nation in history. President Trump has rightly identified this purchase as a national security priority. The legislation gives the office of the Secretary of the Interior 6 months after its passage to ensure that federal documents are updated to reflect the name change." Purchase price estimates. In August 2019, the Washington Post estimated a purchase price of Greenland between $200 million and $1.7 trillion, with a middle estimate of $42.6 billion. The lower figure was based on an inflation and size-adjusted valuation of what the United States paid for Alaska, and the higher figure based on a price-to-earnings ratio of 847, which the newspaper said might be justified on the future valuations of its mineral deposits and the possibility that it might become a residential destination due to both the effects of climate change and becoming a United States territory. The Financial Times' F.T. Alphaville estimated a $1.1 trillion price for the territory. Its sum of the parts analysis valued potential oil fields at $300 billion to $400 billion, rare earth minerals at $500 to $700 billion, and real estate at $200 billion to $220 billion. The newspaper wrote that the U.S. has a history of accretive land acquisitions with a 7.1% internal rate of return for the Louisiana Purchase, 7.4% for Manhattan, and 9.0% for Alaska. 24/7 Wall Street estimated a purchase price for Greenland of $533 billion, using Wyoming as a comparable. If the United States wants it for the strategic value of its property, both on land and offshore, and to project military power, the answer is that of a value of $500 billion is not overly rich, 24/7 Wall Street concluded. FT Alphaville reiterated its $1.1 trillion estimate in 2025. The Economist said of its $50 billion valuation using discounted cash flows, 1/20th of annual U.S. defense spending, or about $1 million to each resident, not including its value to American national security. Given the territory's riches and importance, America could probably make every Greenlander a multimillionaire and still benefit enormously from the purchase. Noel Maurer of George Washington University estimated that royalties and mining tax revenues would be worth $16 to $20 billion to the U.S. federal government, net of the cost of continuing the existing Danish subsidy to Greenland. He discounted future mining revenues for the risk that they might not materialize. Maurer also estimated an additional strategic value between $12 and $24 billion based on past U.S. offers for similar territories, for a total value between $29 billion and $45 billion, or $518,000 and $804,000 per Greenlandic citizen. David R. Barker estimated a $12.5 billion to $77 billion purchase price, noting that if Greenland benefited national security, its value increases with the size of the U.S. economy. Nicholas Swan of credit consultant Swissthink stated that the island's mineral wealth was more important because of the existing American military presence. Barker thought the Financial Times estimate was too high because the government and private industry would share the benefits of drilling and mining rights. Swan said that the importance of pharmaceuticals to the Danish economy strengthened Trump's tariff threat. Several estimates agreed that buying Greenland would be the deal of the century. Governance proposals. Several proposals have been advanced for governance of Greenland in the event of its acquisition by the United States. Former U.S. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien suggested that the United States could award Greenland to Alaska, noting that the native people in Greenland are very closely related to the people of Alaska. A report issued by Audubon found that harmonizing Alaska's common law legal system with the Danish civil law used in Greenland would present issues, and that indigenous populations could face challenges related to rights, cultural preservation, and social integration. The report also found that merging the two countries would offer several advantages for the United States, spanning economic, strategic, and environmental domains. Barry Scott Zelen, a scholar of Arctic strategy at the United States Coast Guard Academy, suggested Greenland could become an organized and unincorporated territory of the United States, but with a clear pathway to eventual admission as a constituent state, not unlike that which Alaska followed. According to Zelen, Greenlandic Inuit, who suffer from a long legacy of neglect and whose colonial experience, despite recent gains in autonomy, has not been entirely positive, may indeed stand to benefit in many ways from this arrangement. In November 2024, Gray proposed that an independent Greenland sign a compact of free association with the United States, which would guarantee American economic and military assistance, describing it as the deal of the century. Trump officials reportedly discussed creating a COFA, and Greenlanders are aware of the proposal, in addition to their own long-standing internal discussions of seeking a COFA with Denmark or the United States. Writing in the Volok conspiracy, Josh Blackman suggested in a post-acquisition scenario that the United States could place Greenland within the 5th Judicial Circuit, whose judges, he opined, might be more friendly to permitting resource extraction. Trevor Filseth of the National Interest wrote that in addition to promising that life in Greenland will remain the same or improve under the American flag as an autonomous territory, Trump should commit to a subsidy larger than Denmark's and exemption from the Jones Act. Coercive annexation. U.S. plans and capabilities. During an 8 January 2025 press conference at the Pentagon, Sabrina Singh declined to answer the question of a reporter who asked, "Are there plans to take Greenland by force if ordered to do so?" saying she would defer comments on the matter to the incoming administration. Asked on 14 January by Senator Mazie Hirono about the potential use of military force to integrate Greenland into the United States, Pete Hegseth, then presumptive nominee for United States Secretary of Defense, stated he would not provide details in a public forum. In January 2025, then Vice President-elect J.D. Vance repeatedly stated that controlling Greenland is critical for U.S. national security and said that there's a deal to be made in Greenland. Following a 15 January telephone call with Trump, Frederickson confirmed the United States' interest in the acquisition of Greenland and its commitment to apply punitive economic sanctions against Denmark until it acquiesced to the transfer of the territory. In a meeting with the Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Policy, Frederickson said the nation was in a serious situation, that unfortunately we could face a situation where our level of economic cooperation might be less than it is today, and that she was concerned for Danish national security as a country and as a kingdom. In advance of the 2025 Greenlandic general election, the Danish Defense Intelligence Service and the Danish Security Intelligence Service indicated they were actively monitoring for potential attempts by foreign states to influence the outcome of the contest. In an interview with TV2, independent analysts named the United States as one possible instigator of clandestine action in the country. The United States is Denmark's largest export market, accounting for more than 17% of all products the country sells externally, while Denmark is the United States' 29th largest export market, accounting for less than 1% of all products it sells externally. Jesper Dagard Farby, Danish country manager of Tradia, said that a trade war between the United States and European Union could cause the inflation to rise and result in bankruptcies of otherwise healthy companies. In April 2025, a plan by the United States for undermining the territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark through a campaign of foreign interference and disinformation on social media became known. In May 2025, Trump stated that he could not rule out a U.S. military annexation of the island. In June 2025, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated the Department of Defense developed plans to take Greenland by force if necessary. Danish plans and capabilities. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen reminded Trump that an attack on the Kingdom of Denmark is an attack on NATO and that all NATO members are obligated to come to Denmark's defense, stating that the Kingdom of Denmark, and thus Greenland, is a member of NATO and is therefore covered by the alliance's collective security guarantee. I strongly urge the United States to cease its threats against a historically close ally. Greenland is considered vital to Danish national security. The official Danish threat assessment, published by the Danish Defense Intelligence Service in 2025, for the first time mentioned the United States as a threat to national security alongside Russia and China. In August 2025, Danmarks Radio reported that at least 3 American men with connections to Donald Trump were being monitored by the Danish Security and Intelligence Service for attempting to infiltrate Greenland. Pett stated that the purpose of such campaigns may be to create discord in the relationship between Greenland and Denmark, and that Pett assesses that this could be done by exploiting existing or fabricating disagreements. The American actions against Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark have been described by Danish observers as hybrid warfare. After Trump resumed his threats against Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark in December 2025, Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen said that we insist that everyone, including the U.S., must show respect for the territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark and the kingdom's sovereign borders. According to defense researcher Christian Sobi Christensen of the University of Copenhagen, Denmark cannot defend Greenland against anybody on its own, and the Danish armed forces are neither equipped nor trained to resist a U.S. invasion. Gadd commented that a United States military-backed acquisition of Greenland would be the shortest war in the world. There is no defensive capacity in Greenland. Mark Jacobson, a professor at the Royal Danish Defence College, opined that the U.S. has de facto control of Greenland already. As of January 2025, Denmark's military stocks were significantly depleted due to recent arms transfers to Ukraine. In January 2025, a European Commission spokesperson stated Denmark could invoke the European Union's mutual defense provisions in the event of a U.S. invasion of Greenland. Daniel Fiat of the Brussels School of Governance stated that such an appeal would be meaningless in its current form as there is no genuine military force behind it. Writing for Irish Legal News, Federica Fazio questioned whether Denmark could, in fact, invoke the EU's mutual defense provisions in the event of the coercive annexation of Greenland, as there is an outstanding question as to whether it is applicable in overseas countries or territories of EU member states, such as Greenland. Fazio also noted that as of 2025, some EU states, such as Italy and Hungary, would probably decline to provide assistance to Denmark altogether, and there is no sanctioning mechanism that could compel them to do otherwise. In late January 2025, the chairman of the European Union Military Committee, Robert Brieger, called for the stationing of European Union military forces in Greenland. The proposal was immediately rejected by Danish Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen. It is a legal uncertainty if Denmark could invoke NATO's mutual defense clause to repel an attack undertaken by another NATO state. Besides ending sales of Ozempic to the United States, foreign policy suggested that Denmark could order Maersk and Lego to stop serving American customers as an economic disincentive for American invasion. Following invasion of Venezuela, on January 3, 2026, it was reported Greenland was next in line. Legal framework. Under the Danish Penal Code, activities that unlawfully threaten Denmark's sovereignty or constitutional order, including through foreign interference or attempts to alter territorial integrity by illegal means, are criminalized under provisions relating to national security and crimes against the state. Public opinion. Greenland. A 2019 article in Arctic Today claimed that about 2/3 of Greenlanders supported the vision of independence from Denmark at some point in the future, but most believe that it would not be viable if it led to cessation of Danish subsidies. The article went on to note that President Trump's notion that Greenland, including all of its 57,000 inhabitants with their distinct language, unique culture, democratic institutions, and the rest of it, could be sold and bought as a simple piece of real estate, collided head-on with all current views in Denmark and Greenland of normality, the status of the kingdom, the value of history, and respectful interchange between peoples as the foundation of the current order of our times. The first survey of the island on foreign policy by the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Foundation in 2021 found that 68% of islanders wanted more cooperation with Denmark. Martin Broom of the Arctic Council said that the finding was not contradictory with the strong support for independence, as many supporters believe that post-independence cooperation with Denmark would be voluntary for Greenland. 69% of Greenlanders wanted more cooperation with the United States, and 75% viewed NATO positively. The survey found that 85% of islanders wanted more cooperation with Canada, which Broom interpreted as wanting closer ties with the Inuit of Nunavut, and not with Canada as a whole. If I am right, this might disturb a few influential people in Nuuk, who have de-emphasized traditional Inuit ties in support for the Inuit Circumpolar Council, he said. A January 2025 poll of 416 residents of Greenland, conducted by the U.S. survey firm Patriot Polling, found that 57.3% of respondents approve of Greenland joining the United States, while 37.4% disapprove and 5.3% are undecided. The poll and the firm behind it was severely criticized by Professor Scott Lucas from University College Dublin, however, who called the poll very suspect, criticizing the lack of information on how the respondents were chosen, which questions were asked, and what was its statistical uncertainty. He also named the firm behind it as a startup organization having a political purpose performing push polls. The CEO of the organization, Luca Ruggieri, came under criticism due to his ties to Republican donors and politicians. A poll of 497 adult residents of Greenland between 22 and 26 January 2025, made by Varian for the national Greenlandic newspaper Sermitsiaq, and the national Danish newspaper Berlingske found that 85% of respondents rejected a proposition that Greenland should leave the Danish realm to become part of the United States, whereas 6% supported the proposition and 9% were undecided. In the same poll, when asked whether they would prefer a Danish or American citizenship, 55% preferred a Danish one and 8% an American one, whereas 37% were undecided. Furthermore, the poll explored opinions on Donald Trump's interest in Greenland. The results indicate that 45% of responders considered Donald Trump's interest in Greenland to be an opportunity, while 43% viewed it as a threat and 13% answered don't know. The statistical uncertainty was reported as between 1.9% and 4.4%. Trump's interest in Greenland has strengthened the cause of Greenland's independence from Denmark. Only the party leader of Kulek stated his support for Trump, but the party failed to win any seats for the 2025 regional election, which was won by the moderate and highly Trump-critical Democrats. The separatist Nalarak, which has pro-Trump members, came in second place. United States. A January 2025 poll of 1,000 U.S. registered voters conducted by Suffolk University found approximately 53% of respondents opposed acquiring Greenland, while 40% supported the idea. A poll of 66,933 U.S. adults by YouGov, fielded on 8 January 2025, found 31% strongly support or somewhat support the U.S. seeking ownership of Greenland, 35% strongly oppose or somewhat oppose such a move, and 34% weren't sure. Responses indicating strong support for the proposal were highest among men, 18 to 29-year-olds, and persons in the southern United States. Responses indicating strong opposition to the proposal were highest among persons over the age of 65 and those in the Midwestern United States. A week later, another poll by YouGov, joint with The Economist, comprising 1,558 U.S. adults, reported that 28% supported the U.S. seeking ownership of Greenland, whereas 47% opposed this and 25% were not sure. About one-fourth of those in favor of U.S. ownership of Greenland, corresponding to 6% of all poll participants, supported using military force to take over Greenland. Another poll of 1,077 U.S. adults conducted by Ipsos for Reuters during 20 to 21 January 2025 showed little supports for plans of extending U.S. territory, finding that only 16% of respondents agreed that the U.S. should pressure Denmark into selling Greenland to the U.S., and 21% that agreed that the U.S. has a right to expand its territory in the Western Hemisphere. Denmark. A January 2025 YouGov poll found that nearly half of Danes consider the United States a significant threat, surpassing concerns about North Korea and Iran, while 78% oppose selling Greenland to the United States. In response to Trump's statements during his second term, Danish residents issued a satirical petition for Denmark to purchase California from the United States. That went viral and attracted several 100,000 Danish signatures in support. The petition parodied Trump's rhetoric as president, bearing the slogan, "Make California Great Again," and vowing to bring Hig to Hollywood, bike lanes to Beverly Hills, and organic smørrebrød to every street corner. All right. See also the 51st state, Greenland, American expansionism under Donald Trump, American imperialism, former organized territories of the United States, Hans Island, list of territory purchased by a sovereign nation from another sovereign nation, movements for the annexation of Canada to the United States, proposed Danish acquisition of California, territorial expansion of the United States. All right, that was long. I hope you found that interesting. There was a lot that I did not know, did not realize. I was sort of the assumption that this was a rather new thing. Clearly it's been going on for over 100 years. So with that said, let me know down in the comments. What are your thoughts? Should the U.S. take over Greenland? Should, Greenland, go independent? What do you think? I'm really curious to see what people have to say about this. But with that said, don't forget, put some sort of a comment letting me know about any other topics you want to cover. Especially I'd like to know about current event topics. I mean, I can always find things for regular videos, but for the current event ones, I do want to know what people want to know more about. So with that said, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this. But regardless, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.